Your pay isn't going as far as it used to. More is going on your rent or your mortgage. Your coffee's more expensive, and so's your electricity. That drop in living standards started around 2021, and it's not going away anytime soon. Economists taking a close look at the government's most recent economic forecasts say Australians could be dealing with this issue into the next decade. Oh. But there is something our leaders could do to make a big difference, according to Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist at macrobusiness.com.au. He's previously worked at the Australian Treasury, the Victorian Treasury and Goldman Sachs, and joins us now. Hello, Leith.
G'day, Kathy. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you, although I'm a bit worried about the price of coffee and electricity, which makes the coffee. How much have our living standards dropped in Australia?
Okay, so the best measure, or probably the most robust measure of living standards is real per capita household disposable income. Now that's effectively so what that is that comes out of the national accounts. The most recent national accounts we've got is in the September quarter, and what it effectively does is it takes the income across all of Australian households, it subtracts out inflation, and it adjusts for population growth. And what that shows is that Australian households' real incomes have fallen by over 8%.
That's considerable.
Massive. So fallen by more than 8% since the middle of 2022. And that is actually the biggest decline in recorded history in Australia. So just to put that into perspective, during the early 90s recession, the recession we had to have, we had a 3.6% peak to trough decline. The current one is running at 8.4%.
Did the pandemic have anything to do with that, given that you said it started to drop in 2022?
Yeah, so we did get an artificial spike during the pandemic. Remember when the government handed out a whole bunch of subsidies, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we saw interest rates fall to record lows, so that actually boosted household disposable income. Since then, everything's reversed. So we've had a period of high inflation where inflation's been higher than wages. That's dragged down our disposable incomes. We've also had obviously a massive 4.25% rise in interest rates, which has basically increased mortgage repayments, so principal and interest, by about 50%. That's also pulled down household disposable income. And we've also had a rise in average tax rates because we've basically had bracket creep. We've also had the expiry of the lower middle income tax threshold offset. And what that's done is that's effectively given more of our money to the tax man, which means we're getting less. And the combination of those three things is behind this massive decline in real per capita household disposable income, which is not only the highest in our recorded history over the period since mid-2022, it's also the highest in the advanced world. So
this is not a race that you want to win, right?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, our households have been hit the hardest out of all advanced economies, and part of that's because we have one of the highest shares of variable mortgage rates. So when the RBA lifted interest rates, it flowed straight onto our mortgage holders, whereas in most other countries they have fixed rates, so they haven't been hit as hard. And obviously all these other issues like, we've had obviously the sharp fall in real wages and other things. But yeah, it's certainly not a race we want to win, and unfortunately we are way behind the eight ball here. Well,
how do you turn that around?
Look, it's very hard. So unfortunately, as these economists said, they said that we're probably not going to recover for about a decade to get back to where we were, which sounds about right to me. Unfortunately,
and they're the government's economists who are saying that.
So the mid-year economic and fiscal update outlook, which was released by the Federal Treasury, that only provided 4-year updates. But if you extrapolate that out, it suggests we're probably not going to recover until 2030 at least, and the RBA's forecasts are similar. So unfortunately, it's going to be a long road back to basically where we are in the middle of 2022. It could take up to a decade. And what Australia really needs is we need higher productivity. So what productivity is, it's how much output we have per hour of labour. And so it's effectively how much we produce per person. And unfortunately, what's happened is Australia's labour productivity has fallen to 2016 levels. So we've gone backwards 8 years there. And unless we get that productivity improving, we're not going to have a decent rebound in incomes. And that's unfortunately is the reality of the situation. Our productivity has been very poor, and that's actually going to preclude us from having a decent rebound in incomes.
Productivity may be poor, which means you have to produce more to get productivity to go up. But what if you feel like you're working the hardest in your life and yet the productivity is not going up? What is the answer to that?
Yeah, look, this certainly isn't a value judgment on individuals. I mean, everyone works hard. It's more a symptom of the structure of the economy. So Australia's economic structure has shifted towards services. So back in late 1970s, for example, 15% of our GDP came from manufacturing. That's now around 5%. We've got the smallest manufacturing share in the advanced world.
What happened?
And unfortunately, our manufacturing has crashed. So we've basically given up manufacturing in this country. And what that means is that when you have less manufacturing, it effectively means you have less productivity growth, because the manufacturing sector across the world tends to drive nations' productivity. And the reason for that is you compete with internationally on manufacturing, so you get a lot of competition. A lot of your output depends on capital investment, so new machines, new innovations, that sort of thing, which drives up your productivity. You don't actually need a lot more labour. Unfortunately, as our manufacturing sector shrunk, we've replaced that with services which tend to have very slow productivity growth. And in Australia's case, with the expansion of the NDIS and other things, we've had a massive expansion of services jobs in these sort of publicly funded jobs, which are notoriously difficult to get productivity growth. So that's
because it takes as long as it takes. If you're delivering a service, you've got 40 minutes to deliver a particular service, and that's it. It's not like you're going to deliver that service in 20 minutes, a quality service, and then move on to do the next one, is it?
Yeah, that's right. If you're driving a bus, it still takes you, X amount of hours from, time from A to B. If you make a coffee, there's only so quickly you can make a coffee, all that sort of thing. So as Australia's economy has shifted to being the most service-dependent economy really in the advanced world, because we don't have any manufacturing, that has, worked against our productivity growth, unfortunately.
Okay, Leith, so this is all very depressing. And if we're a service-based economy where we can't get our productivity up that way, is there any other way to lift it?
Well, yeah. So look, it would make sense for Australia to try and get its manufacturing share up, but the only way it can really do that is if we lower energy prices. So one of the factors that's been behind Australia's recent manufacturing collapse. So we saw it last year, where Australia's last plastics manufacturer, Quenos, closed shop because of high energy prices. We've seen a whole bunch of manufacturers shut down because of expensive energy. Now, Australia is sitting on oodles of energy. We export oodles of gas, oodles of coal, oodles of everything, mostly to China, who has a massive manufacturing sector. Unfortunately, we have engineered expensive energy in this country. And the single best thing we could do to get our manufacturing share back up is to give ourselves cheap energy. And the simplest way to do that would be to fix the gas market. So on the East Coast...
Can you explain that gas market simply and quickly, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, okay. So on Australia is the biggest gas exporter in the world. On the East Coast, we have two different markets, West Coast and East Coast. They're separated because we don't have a pipeline. But on the East Coast, our East Coast market, 75% of our gas is exported. It is the only market in the world that does not have domestic reservations, so there's no requirement to give it to us first.
So just sell it to the highest bidder.
That's right, yeah, and most of it goes to China, right? So we basically freeze our gas and send nearly 3/4 of it overseas. Most of it goes to China. We've starved ourselves domestically of gas on the East Coast, because through having no reservation, that sent the gas price soaring through the moon. And that has, in effect, also pushed up electricity prices, because gas sets the electricity price as well. It's the marginal price setter for electricity. And if we're going to shut down all our coal-fired generation and that sort of thing and go towards renewables, you need a backstop, because when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you need hydrocarbon electricity generation, and gas is the best form of that. But we've made gas expensive, and as a result, we have expensive gas, expensive electricity, and our manufacturing sector is collapsing, and we need to fix that.
Leith, just on wages, Dermot from the Northern Beaches has sent in a text, and I think it's a really valid point that he's making, and I'm hoping that you can clarify the difference here. Dermot says, don't put all the blame on the current government. Wage stagnation was definitely a policy of the coalition government. How much of this is political, or how much of it is entrenched?
Oh, look, this spans back to the years, and I'd also argue that we've run an extremely high immigration program for 20 years, and that's also helped contributed to lower wage growth as well. So, this has been bipartisan, all levels of government, unfortunately, and but the central point is we're not going to get higher real wage growth over the long term unless we can boost that productivity, and that's the key thing Australia needs to look at. How do we get that productivity up? And I think we need to, go back to actually making some things in this country. We don't make anything anymore. We've become a highly, one of the most service-dependent economies in the world.
And you think we would have learnt that during the pandemic when we discovered that we couldn't get things from overseas that we were used to getting. Leith, thank you very much for joining me here on 612 ABC Local Radio.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Anytime.
Leith Van Onselen is the Chief Economist at macrobusiness.com.au. He's previously worked at the Australian Treasury, Victorian Treasury and Goldman Sachs. He made the point there that here in Australia we don't make things anymore. And later in the program I will be talking to a family member from a business from Cairns that decided to can tuna because they have a tuna fishery. And they couldn't find anywhere in Australia to can Australian tuna. They're expecting their first shipment this week. It'll come from Thailand.